Hey, you're not my ex, but it's been a while since we last talked, and unlike her, I actually missed all of you. Today, we're doing a game review again, after approximately 94,608,000 seconds, or 94,608,000 seconds for those of you overseas. That's 3 years, by the way. The game in question, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Now, I don't know who this Clair Obscur is, but spoiler alert, she made a banger. In fact, as of right now, this is easily my candidate for Game of the Year, and yes, I know, it's hard to believe, but this game is better than Assassin's Creed Shadows, and somehow even better than Polly Pocket Super Splash Island. Now, what the hell is this game, and what is it about? Well, one day, a group of nerds over in France thought, Persona and Megami Tensei games are really good, but you know what they're missing? France and QuickTime events. And thus, this game was born. The premise of the game is very simple. Every year, the paintress, wakes up and paints a cursed number. Everyone whose age matches that number goes to the big France in the sky. They die. Considering that it started from the number 100, I'd say the first 20 or so times she painted were probably not even that big of a deal. Those 93-year-old grannies already had one foot in the grave either way. The problem is, ever so slowly, the world's population is ending. Soon, every elderly, adult, and thankfully teenager and child will be gone. It's up to you to finally put an end to all of this. The protagonist, Gustave, who I'm pretty sure is just Robert Pattinson but French, sets out on an expedition with this group of fellow rabble-rousers in order to make the paintress take the eternal nap. I'll do my absolute best to not spoil any bits of the story, but I can tell you one thing. This story has some of the best pacing and is developed through some of the most emotional cutscenes out of any game I've played in recent years, to the point where I almost nearly came close to crying out a single one tear, and that's saying something because the only other time I've ever cried in my entire life was when I was 6 and found out that the sun was going to explode in 5 billion years. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I never exaggerate or tell lies. Anyways, still on the subject of the lore, I don't think I've ever seen so many interactable NPCs in a game ever. In fact, at times that might have actually been a negative, like in the beginning of the game where I spent nearly 2 hours only experiencing exposition through means of secondary dialogues before I could actually get into the action. Obviously, you could just ignore all of the NPCs and proceed towards the main objective, but I really, truly, highly advise against that, as I feel the lore in this game is worth every second of the exposition. Another point that supports that claim is that the dialogue managed to be funny.
Out of the question. I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
As opposed to that cringy fuckery taking place in AC Shadows.
Tell me a joke.
Why must samurai always battle one another? Because there is only one way for a samurai to get ahead. Ahead. I did not say it was a good joke.
Or that one game that I don't really remember the name but sucked ass and had horrible dialogue all around. I'll just put up a clip of it because it was genuinely so irrelevant that I don't remember the name.
Did I just do that?
Well, definitely with my assistance.
I did not just do that.
We did.
I just moved shit with my mind.
Perhaps our connection has somehow awoken some abilities.
I just moved shit with my mind.
I just keep hearing I.
I just moved shit with my freaking mind!
Watch this.
To wrap up the coverage of this game's story, the one thing I'm extra grateful for is how easy it is to follow. Not only do I have the attention span of a baby chimpanzee that just so happened to find my dad's stash of cocaine that he keeps in his underwear drawer, my IQ is also countable on 1/5 of one hand. But even then, I never had an issue following the story at all. On the contrary, after every single cutscene I was left in such a state of shock that I forced myself to keep going forward in order to find out what happened next, even if that meant that I would later need to drive to work on 2.5 hours of sleep and a stomach filled with nothing but raw bread and a glass of lukewarm Jack Daniels. That's just how good the development is. It also helps that the characters' acting, their graphical qualities, and the insanely well portrayed facial expressions will at times legitimately make you forget that you're not watching a movie but rather playing a video game. To complement the narrative, just look at this game's art direction. No, I mean actually look at it. Why aren't you looking? Just alt-tab back into the video and look at it, goddammit. Nowadays, you're hard-pressed to find art direction so good that it makes every single area in the game feel unique, whether it's through the architecture of the area, the choice of color palette for the vegetation, or even the sky. Most importantly, it seems like the game makes it a point to use as many floaty magic rock thingies as possible. That shit goes hard. In all seriousness though, the sheer amount of distinctive and individual areas in this game is just absolutely stunning. There was never an instance of me playing the game and thinking, I think I've been here before. And it's not just the scenery in this game that looks great, but the character design in general is just very solid. And no, I'm not just saying that because they made a hot goth, vaguely Asian girl as one of the main characters, and I can appreciate that. Much like Stellar Blade, Love and Deep Space, and Enzoi, everyone in this game is hot. If I wanted to see shittily designed ugly ass characters, I would play Concord, open up Tinder, or look in the mirror. But even the non-human characters in the game look cool. One example is the Gestrels, a tribe of paintbrushes that are unfortunately Italian. Maybe, I don't know, they sound Italian, but anyway, they made living paintbrushes quirky and unique, which is probably very difficult. And if you think they aren't cool, then, well, you're a dumbass, because just look at how jacked this one is. This one has boobs, but really, the variety of enemy designs is very extensive, and once again, they're completely different from area to area. Of course, the bosses are also very well designed and varied, with some being very reminiscent of the Souls franchise, while others might just be a turtle named Francois. You might think I'm joking, but no, Francois is a turtle that can actually one-shot you. If we go by Pokemon logic, they'd be weak to grass, and Earth is the closest thing we have to grass, so it's grass.
Earth flies.
It wasn't grass. Huh, the strongest ice attack ever? It's gonna be something stupid. To wrap up the art direction part of the review, the visual effects in this game just look phenomenal. Not only do most skills have its own unique set of particle effects, but every melee weapon has its own set of particle effects as well. Well, at least every single one that I used. The attention to detail in this game is good to the point of being frightening. As for the gameplay, like I said before, this game is very reminiscent of my beloved Persona and the Shin Megami Tensei series, but the twist here is the introduction of real-time combat elements, with those being majoritarily defensive mechanics. In Persona and most other JRPGs, if you want to block an attack, you just have to select an actual block or guard command. In this game, if you want to not take damage, your only options are parrying, dodging, or jumping. In that regard, the game is very rewarding for people who dedicate the time to learning the timings for the parries and dodges, because in successfully doing so, you're not only rewarded with not getting one-shotted by the likes of Francois, but also with AP, which is the mana or MP of this game. While dodges are easier to execute and more forgiving of missed timings, they only give you 1 AP regardless of how many hits you dodge, whereas parries, even though they are much harder to perform than dodges, will give you 1 AP per hit that you parry. What I mean by that is, if you get 5-hit comboed by an enemy and you dodge all 5 hits, you're only going to get 1 AP out of it. But if you parry all 5 hits, that's 5 AP in your pocket. That is what I meant by the game rewarding you for learning timings, since dodges and parries negate all damage received regardless of whether you're fighting a sentient Italian paintbrush or a monster the size of one twin tower. But successfully utilizing them will give you a longer uptime on your skills. That being said, I find that the timings for each of those commands can be very hard to grasp at first. My suggestion is that when fighting an enemy for the first time, try and learn the timing of their attacks by first dodging everything, since even if you mistime your dodge, you can still avoid the damage if you didn't mistime it by a lot, and then try parrying later on. Or don't, I don't really give a fuck. The other cool thing about parries is that when you successfully parry an enemy's full combo and make them your bitch, your character will counter for some big boy damage. AoE attacks that hit the entire party are also parryable, and in doing so trigger this cool ass slow motion animation that does even bigger boy damage. As a side note, I really do recommend trying to remember the parry timings by rhythm as opposed to visuals, as if you were trying for a full clear on Osu or Hatsune Miku's Project Diva. Most enemy combos have a predefined cadence to them, and at one point I found myself not even having to look at the opponent's animation anymore, since the rhythm of their attacks was always the same. Not only that, many enemies have attacks that provide a sound cue before landing, like a once you hear that bad boy, you just press B or ball if you're on a PS5 controller like I am, and the parry or dodge is pretty much guaranteed. One of the non-defensive real-time mechanics is shooting. the game gives each character ranged attack capabilities, which you can use in the middle of battle for 1 AP per shot without ending your turn. This is useful because some enemies have weak spots, shields and so forth, and by using your ranged attacks you can get an advantage by dealing huge damage when hitting said weak spots, or by removing their shields by shooting, allowing whichever skill you use to reach their full damage potential. On that note, I'm not sure if it's actually the case, but I felt as if the game had a bit of input lag at the start. Even though I was playing on an Xbox controller connected through Bluetooth, I played and got every achievement on Rise of the Ronin recently with that same setup and never felt any input lag or latency at all. That being said, switching to a PS5 controller with a direct USB connection did fix it, so maybe there was actually input lag, or maybe the actual lag was in the synapses of my brain. As far as the rest of combat is concerned, again, it is very similar to Persona and SMT. You have your regular attack, defense, and speed buffs and debuffs. Well, you don't have evasion buffs and debuffs like you do in Persona, since you're the one doing the evading, but you do have the same elemental weakness and resistance system at play. I would tell you outright what element and what enemies are weak and resistant to what, but I won't. I don't think you deserve to know. You haven't earned it yet. Another thing about this game is the usage of quick time events. Whenever you cast a skill, it doesn't matter if it's a buffing skill, or a healing skill, or an offensive skill, you do have to perform certain quick time events which vary in terms of timing, but never in terms of what button you have to press. At first, this is a bit challenging, and there is a punishment if you do miss time these quick time events. Like for example, certain skills in Lune's skill set will outright just stun you if you miss the quick time event. But at one point later in the game, I felt like they got a little bit tiring, and maybe the developers also thought about this because they did put an automatic quick time event option in the accessibility part of the settings, but I never turned it on. I just wish they had a little more variation in terms of what buttons you need to press, because then it would actually become a little more of a challenge. Anyway, one of the coolest parts of this game's combat system is how uniquely every character plays. I don't know how many times I use the word unique or its variations in this video, but someone that isn't me should go back and count it. Anyway, what I mean is every character has an individual mechanic or gimmick to them. For example, Gustav has a mechanical arm that can stack charges by parrying and dealing damage, and once all filled up, can do big damage with this overcharge skill. Male, weird name for a female, has a fencing-like system with different stances for offensive and defensive play, where you have to juggle between 3 different stances. Offensive, where you deal 50% more damage but you also take 50% more damage. Defensive, where you take 50% less damage but you earn extra AP on parries and dodges. And virtuose, virtuose? I don't fucking know, who cares? Where you legit just deal 200% more damage. Using one skill while being in a certain stance might have some bonus effects on said skill, like applying extra stacks of burn. Lune, the hot Asian goth witch, can collect stains depending on what skill she uses, and those stains can later be consumed by other skills of different elements in order to increase the damage dealt or just outright nullify the AP cost for that skill. These different combat mechanics make it so that you actually have to use more than a single brain cell in order to set up your builds and your skills. I'm slow, both mentally and physically, and so at first I mostly pushed through the game without spending too much time on my builds, and that made things significantly harder. Here's a pro tip: if you're gonna fight a guy that is entirely made out of fire, don't bring fire weapons and fire damage skills. Now, it wouldn't be an RPG without a shitload of different equipment, or how this game calls it, pictos. I have no clue what the hell that means. All I know is that I want to see a pic of those toes. Wait, who the fuck put this in my script? Who put this in my script, goddammit? Pictos are pieces of gear that not only provide you with stat boosts for your, well, stats such as speed, attack, vitality, and whatnot, but they also have passive skills that can legit trivialize the fighting in this game or cuck you royally in a moment of sheer desperation. These passive skills can be simple damage increases for basic attacks, higher critical hit chances when hitting enemies under certain conditions, or they can change certain mechanics. For example, one of my favorite ones gives you +1 AP when you parry, and another one will straight up just give you +1 AP at the start of a battle. Things like these make the game considerably easier, especially once you have the timing of the parry down, since you'll be getting a lot more AP, and thus you'll be able to utilize stronger skills that require more AP. By the way, when I said they can cuck you royally, I was referring to this piece of shit that I forgot to unequip, where you take 50% less damage but you cannot be healed. Here's another pro tip: Francois gives no fucks about 50% less damage. He will fuck you up regardless. There are a lot of skills to pick for your builds in this game, and even though it's not on a level of autism like Path of Exile 2's, because nothing is, you still need to think your builds through thoroughly, mostly because of each character's mechanic. Using the example that I've stated before with Mael's different stances, she is less than worthless if you only pick skills that set her to one specific stance, and no skills that make use of that stance for an extra bonus. Same thing with Lune and all of the other characters that I didn't mention because it would be a spoiler. That being said, skills aren't the only thing you'll have to think through in this game. Weapons also affect the way you play in a big way. Not only does every weapon give different bonuses to different stats, but each weapon has passive skills unlocked at weapon levels 4, 10, and 20. Along with that, some weapons also have elemental damage properties to them, meaning you can't just pick your weapon willy-nilly like a fat kid hopped up on birthday cake picking up a plastic fork at a Chuck E. Cheese. You actually have to think it through well enough so that, unlike me, you don't bring an ice damage dealing weapon to fight a dude that is literally entirely made out of goddamn ice. Now, onto one of the things that I wasn't really too thrilled about in this game, the exploration. Don't get me wrong, as beautiful and large as the world in this game is, exploring it can be frustrating at times. The game's world is semi-open, meaning there is a central kind of hub world that is considerably larger with a lot more secrets to uncover, and then there are the level or stage-like places that you can access from the hub world. Exploring the hub world itself is fine. At first it can be a bit slow because you do move comparatively slower in it given its scale, but later on you befriend this huge fat dude named Esquier who lets you ride inside deep one of his cavities in order to get to places faster. The issue is the smaller stages that you access from the hub world. You see, this game has no mini-map, which wouldn't be a problem if the level design wasn't a bit lackluster in terms of hinting towards where you should go. It doesn't necessarily need to set up huge signs along the way saying, hey dumbass, over here. But sometimes in order to progress, you'll need to go through a little teeny tiny corridor that isn't really easily viewable. Don't get me wrong though, that wasn't the standard for the whole game, mostly only for the first levels, as later levels in the game actually have a fairly linear path for progression. It might seem like I'm just being a little bitch, and that's because I am. Anyway, the second thing that bothered me a little bit about exploring in this game was the fact that, again, inside of these levels, there are several areas where it would seem like you can access them, only for you to run into an invisible wall, which, by the way, there are tons of in this game. Also, a lot of invisible geometry that you sometimes get stuck into. And also this one instance in the hub world where God sent me, his fattest soldier, to get stuck in between this lamp and this other thing, which forced me to set up camp just to get unstuck. Another thing that is a bit annoying in terms of exploring the world is the fact that if you're inside of a level and you want to go back to the continent, I forgot to mention, that's the name of the hub world, by the way. I should have been calling it continent instead of hub world this whole time. I bet that's pretty annoying if you care about that kind of thing. Anyway, if you want to go back to the continent, your only options are either to walk all the way back through the level, or fast travel to the earliest checkpoint and then still have to walk from there. Later on in the game, you do unlock a feature that allows you to go back to the continent from any checkpoint inside the level, but that'll take you about 15 or so hours of gameplay. And then another thing is that there is no fast travel in the continent, meaning that if you want to go back to an earlier location in the game, and you're in one of the endgame locations, you'll have to swim and run and walk and bounce your way back there. Dragon's Dogma fans probably just got wet hearing that. I particularly wasn't really all that bothered by it, given that the fat boy swims incredibly fast for someone with such small legs. The other thing I wasn't exactly too thrilled about, or rather, I was fucking fuming about, was the fact that the game just outright crashed about 5 or 6 times during my playthrough for no apparent fucking reason. At first I thought it was because I had activated AMD Fluid Motion Frames on AMD's Adrenaline software. Turning that off did nothing because the game then proceeded to crash several more times. At one point the crashes just stopped, but I can tell you that in one occasion the game crashed harder than Macho Man Randy Savage's car after he had a heart attack while driving. So much so that it also crashed OBS, which I was using for streaming, and it brought down the whole fucking stream. I'm not sure what caused this, since I didn't have any problems running the game at all on a 7900 XTX Nitro Plus, but if you're an AMD user, that is something to look out for. StarForge, sponsor me. To wrap up this video, I just could not leave out my favorite part about the game. This game's magnum opus, the soundtrack. Usually whenever I start a game, if that game isn't Persona, Nier Replicant, Automata, or Die-Hack GU, I'll set my audio settings like this. But this game made me want to play it like this. The composers for this game's soundtrack could not have done a better job at creating music that perfectly fits every single location, scenario, and mood. Oh, you're fighting a French mime? Here, have some music that sounds like a baguette, wine, cologne, and riots. Village filled with those damn Italian paintbrushes. Here, this song sounds like pizza and a little like Mexico, weirdly enough. The sad music indeed makes you feel sad, the epic music indeed gets your cock hard and ready, and every time you head into battle in a different location, you can bet your sweet ass the music will be different. I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years from now, this game got the Nier treatment and had orchestras playing this live on theaters, because to me, the OST truly is on that level. As to final side notes, yes, there is a character customization, and obviously I left Loon in the bathing suit for almost the entirety of the game, and I also left this chick with a baguette on her back because, you know, France and shit. And lastly, this game is $50. Just think about that for a second. This game is $10 less than Assassin's Shit Shadows, with 8 billion times the quality. It was literally a group of like 15 to 16 French nerds that got together and said, yeah, I guess we could just make one of the greatest games of the last 4 to 5 years, and they're selling it for 50 doubloons only. Do yourself a favor, play Expedition 33. And I cannot wait for Expedition 32, and Expedition 31, and Expedition 30, and Expedition 29, and Expedition 28. Also Expedition 27, and Expedition 26. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you did not enjoy the video, leave a dislike. You can catch the streams on Twitch or YouTube. I've been told they make for great background noise. Follow me on Twitter at UsagiHungYaku, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.